Welcome. I'm Dr. Ken Piper, and this is a video series of teaching and learning called The Wonder of Our Bodies. Today we're going to explore the awareness of being alive, how we who are we, where are we, the senses of awareness. So we're going to look at a broad approach to body senses, starting with senses of survival. So to survive, you need to really notice what's happening. If you go back in time when we roamed forests looking for food and did not want to be prey to some other life form, actively noticing everything will make the difference. Actively noticing makes us aware. And when we're aware, we are present. We are right here, this place, right now. So we're going to talk about sensing, and this means we have to look at stimuli. So in most of our world, stimuluses we respond to are light waves, sound waves, chemicals in the air, chemicals in food and water, chemicals that touch our body, and then contact, all the way the world contacts us with different temperatures and different touches and different pressures. So when we look at survival and we look at these senses, I'd like you to keep just one thing in mind. There'll be a stimulus, and our body then has to measure the energy of that stimulus. And we have all these receptors, amazing receptors all over, to distinguish what is the stimulus and what is the energy. The receptor then has to transfer the stimulus energy into energy that can go up the nerves to the brain. And so we have a big fancy term which is called a transducer. Receptors are transducers. Let's just use the word change. So the receptor changes stimulus energy into kind of human electrical energy that sends it up the nerves. The nerves then get routed up to specific areas of the brain, and it's in those areas that we perceive. We don't see in our eye. As we'll show you in a minute, you see in the back of your brain. So just a quick review then, from stimulus contact to perception, we have a series of steps. In every part of our body where there is a sensing system, this kind of sequence will follow. Measure it, change it, transmit it, put it in the right place, integrate it with other data, and then we perceive it. In grade school, we learned there are 5 senses, but there's probably more than 30. There's a whole bunch of senses. I'm not going to try to go through all of them, but I have grouped them into, I hope, some interesting ways of thinking. And one is that there are survival senses that we really don't pay attention to. We don't think about them every day, but if you go back, 500,000 years, you lived or died by what you could see and smell and hear and taste, and you lived or died by maintaining enough oxygen in your body. So I grouped these 5 together. Seeing is critical. So for the human at least, seeing is being tall enough to look around. We have to look back and forth, look up and down, and really process what's happening. Here's one of the wonders of the human body, and the miracles are everywhere. Everywhere I'm going to show you, there are wonders and miracles, and oh my gosh, how can this be? So look at the eye. Look at that white area, kind of right in the front third. That's the lens of the eye. And it has special liquid-like material inside. You can see it's kind of oval-shaped. Well, what holds the lens in place are little bitty strings attached to little tiny muscles. So those little muscles are called the ciliary body muscles. If the muscles tighten, the strings get pulled, and if you pull on the strings, you tighten up, stretch the lens, and it'll get narrower. And if you relax those little muscles and the strings relax, the lens will begin to expand and get wider. And that's how we focus light, to maintain it on the back of the eye. Right in front of the lens is the iris, which in humans creates a round pupil. In cats, the pupil is up and down. It's a slit. So light comes in the front, goes through the pupil, goes down through the lens, gets focused in the back, and that whole back of the eyeball is called the retina. And when I look with a scope inside your eye, that red area in the middle is the macula. That's where all the key central vision gets focused. The white circle is the big bundle of nerves leaving the retina, leaving the back of your eyeball, and going up into the brain. It's called the optic nerve. The little tiny red small blood vessels are little tiny arteries and veins. If those arteries and veins, and they're really tiny, this is the only place in the body we can see blood vessels this small. If these arteries look healthy and well, then the little arteries in your brain, the little arteries in your heart, the little arteries in your kidneys are most likely going to be healthy and well. The retina, way at the back, picks up color. Again, the light comes in the eye, travels back, and the receptors for light energy are at the back of the retina, the farthest layer inside, and there are little areas called cones that pick up color, red, green, and blue, and then little short receptors called rods. They pick up intensity. So in humans, we got about 20 rods for every cone. Owls have a couple of hundred rods for every cone. So they have amazing sensitivity in low light, and of course we know they can fly at night. So after the retina picks up these images, the receptors transmit it into human electrical energy, and you can see that the left eyeball receptors send the message way back to the right side of the back of the brain, and opposite on the right side. That's a long distance away for processing. The eyeball has to move back and forth. There are 6 muscles that control it. The brain has 3 nerves controlling 6 muscles. And in just talking about survival, you see that muscle right in the middle. That's the muscle that pulls the eye left and right, left and right, left and right. There's one nerve that controls that one muscle, which means it's rapid, it's quick, and we can really make something happen fast. And that's survival. If you're walking through a rainforest, the ability to look left, right, back and forth means you can see something, a movement, a shadow, something that could make a difference in living or dying. As I mentioned, the brain has all these specific regions to handle different senses. The pink area is where vision goes. Now, smell is a little different. Smell is something we all kind of think about. We joke about it. We all have our favorite stinkies. We all have our tolerances and intolerances, but we all smell the same. Way up in the top of the nose, there's little bitty nerves, little bitty smell nerves. And there's about 10,000 different chemicals that we can detect. And there's little nerves for each one of those chemicals. It's a chemical sensing system. And those little nerves send messages up to that yellow area called the bulb. It's kind of like a clearinghouse. And that sends the messages right back to the brain. So we are constantly sensing the air that comes up through the nose in front. But notice that we also sense air that goes into our mouth, that goes back up behind the soft palate, the tissue that hangs down in the back of your throat. So we are actually smelling air in our mouth that comes up and smelling air in our nose that goes down, and dogs do the same thing. wolves a long time ago, that whole evolutionary history of canines, they had to really smell. They had to really be able to smell the zebra a mile away, chase it down, track it. And so dogs are smell machines. That long snout is filled with millions of receptors. Their little olfactory bulb clearing is huge compared to their brain. Smell machines, they really do a good job. And smell is processed in that green area. So it comes from the nose and goes right back to the front of the green area. Very quick connection. We really can process quickly what we smell. Hearing, also an unconscious survival. We do pretty well. At the top you see the ear. Humans have quite a wide range of frequencies we can pick up. If you look over on the far right, the owls and dolphins and crickets have a whole different range of hearing. Notice in the middle that dogs, kind of just a short little band of hearing acuity. So dogs are smell machines, but they don't hear a lot of frequencies. And so one of the reasons when you say, hey, come on, Jack, come on back, it's because they don't hear you. In humans, sound waves, this is another kind of stimulus energy, come in the ear, go up the canal, vibrate the eardrum. Eardrum vibrates 3 tiny little bones, and those little tiny bones vibrate this spiral structure called the cochlea. So when you vibrate at the opening of the cochlea, you actually move fluid, kind of wiggle it back and forth, and the wiggling of the fluid is what picks up the receptor. There's little tiny hairs on these nerve receptors called cilia, and the fluid moves back and forth. The little hair cells swip back and forth. That sends a receptor message up to the brain, and what we receive through that system goes into the green area, kind of in the middle, the temporal lobe. So what we see is transmitted to the back of the brain in pink. What we hear goes right to the green, very close to the ears. What we smell goes to the front of the green, very close. We taste, and most of the time we taste with the tip of our tongue, and we do that because the tongue has sweet receptors mostly on the front. Not exclusively, but sweet and salt and bitter and sour are all kind of in different areas. Bitter is way at the back, so that if we really put something in our mouth that could be bad for us, by the time it gets to the back of the throat, that's the final test of whether this thing we're eating could be poisonous or not poisonous. The oxygen that we talked about, again, we don't think about this, but it's live or die. There's all kinds of situations where we could be in trouble because the oxygen level isn't good enough, and the body has a tremendous system. There's a little receptor located in your neck. Those big red blood vessels are the carotid arteries. A little receptor is right between the 2 carotids, measures oxygen, sends it up, a nerve message, not to the thinking brain, but to a lower brain center called the medulla. And when that oxygen sensor fires to the medulla will sound an alarm that the entire body will feel. The medulla will make the heart beat fast, raise the blood pressure, pour adrenaline into the system, tighten up all the muscles, make every effort to move the chest, make every effort to move the body to a place where there's more oxygen. It's a pretty immaculate system, and drowning, of course, is horrible because this receptor activates and your body will do everything it possibly can do for as long as it can do it to get to any place that there's air. So these survival systems, the way I'm just presenting it, are matched by other survival sensing systems where we're a little more aware of it. We're more aware of hunger and being full. We're more aware of inner temperature. We're more aware of being thirsty. We're more aware of love for another or bonding with our children. Hunger and being full are kind of two sides of the same thing. And there's many dynamics in the body, many ways that the brain gets messages about energy levels that we interpret as hunger. I'm not going to go into glucose sensing systems at this point and other ways that we feel hungry, but one of the very basic ways is the stomach's got a mind of its own. The stomach has all kinds of ways to know if there's full or not, if it's stretched or empty, if there's good stuff in it or bad stuff. But the stomach can send a message to the brain, and this is not a nerve message, it is a hormone message that goes through the bloodstream. So the stomach makes a chemical called ghrelin, which goes up to the brain, the hypothalamus, and tells the hypothalamus, we need energy, we are hungry. So the perception of hunger is actually a hormone message coming from our stomach, but the brain interprets that chemical as hunger. Fat cells send another chemical called leptin to the same hypothalamus, and that chemical tells the hypothalamus we're full. So the brain gets two different messages. We perceive those as I need to eat more or I'm okay. And one of the dynamics in our country right now where we have too much food is this system gets desensitized. It doesn't work in the same way. And you can eat where you should feel full, but then you go eat again. The messages aren't coming through, and this is the source of a lot of research right now to understand this more and try to deal with it. Our body takes care of inner temperature, and we're aware when we get too hot inside, like with fever. We're aware when we get too cold inside. If it gets too cold, the inner body perceives this and will send messages to make the muscles quiver. Chills are a way to generate heat. Muscles are our main source of heat generation. If we get too hot inside, the brain perceives that and sends messages to open up blood vessels and divert fluid to the outer body to try to radiate the heat and sweat it off. Thirst is a consciousness. In our brain, there's a center that measures how much fluid we have in our system. Too much fluid, too little fluid. And in the back of the pituitary, remember the pituitary is right in the middle of your brain. The front of the pituitary regulates all our hormones, like thyroid and adrenal. The back of the pituitary makes chemicals. And regarding thirst, if we don't have enough fluid, there's a chemical released from the pituitary that goes to the kidney, and it tells the kidney to hang on to fluid. The chemical's called ADH, antidiuretic hormone. Now, bonding is also interesting because in the same part of the pituitary that makes the thirst hormone, the pituitary makes a bonding hormone called oxytocin. So when a newborn baby begins breastfeeding, there's a tremendous stimulation from those receptors at the breast going up to the brain that stimulates the release of oxytocin, which produces this euphoric bonding love between mother and baby. And any of you, any women who are listening who've had babies, you know what it means more than we men will ever know. There's that moment of joy, perfect perfection, and enduring love that you can't really describe. It is a bonding deep within mother and child. Unfortunately, oxytocin is also now being referred to as the love hormone because during sexual intercourse, there's a stimulation for release of oxytocin. And that's when you think about a million years ago, 500,000 years ago, if a man was going to impregnate you, it would make evolutionary survival sense that you would bond to him. Unfortunately, there's all kinds of stuff on the internet where you can buy sprays and creams and pills that they claim is oxytocin. It's a popular thing right now. Here's a woman who had the chemical structure of oxytocin tattooed on her body. So we've talked about survival sensing in areas that we don't think about. We've talked about survival sensing in areas that we're more conscious. To stay alive over our evolution, we have to see, smell, hear, taste, and maintain oxygen. But we also have to take care of hunger and fullness, and modulate temperature, and reproduce. So this is part one of a three-part series on the senses of awareness. In part two, we're going to talk about senses that determine how we feel the world and how we move in the world. I would welcome any comments you want to make on my website about any of the talks. I have an email address that you can use, which is thewonderwithin@gmail.com. Thank you for your attention, and we will talk again in part two.